I'll complain. I'm human. I'm like, well, I didn't heat it and I don't
Yeah.
like, but I'm like, these are literally the days of answered prayer. And, I look around my house with my kid, my dog, my husband,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, is my life.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Tazz, and you are listening to the intro podcast, or you watching, whichever one you're doing. Look, I just appreciate you for doing it because you didn't have to come back. Today's guest, I am excited. I originally met her through the Coming Out Swinging podcast, and her story was so remarkable. Before they could even completely get off the broadcast, I was like, I have to have you on the show because this testimony and story that you are about to hear on today can absolutely change your life of the life or the life of someone that you know. Today's guest is Arthur, sister, homie, child of God, everything, Miss Tavia Bradford. We're here talking about her book today, Blessings in the Chaos. It's a raw and inspiring memoir that follows Tavia's journey through love, loss, and unshakable faith. After losing her first child and enduring a difficult divorce, Tavia rebuilds her life and finds unexpected love. Despite setbacks, her unwavering faith guides her through career challenges and high-risk pregnancy and the joys of new motherhood. That right there is that's it. I don't have to say nothing else. That's it right there. How are you, Miss Tavia Bradford?
I am well. I am well. I cannot complain. God has been too good to do that. So,
Man, you gonna start something and we're gonna have a whole nother kind of conversation. I enjoy talking about my daddy. Um,
hmm
just get into it. Get reading your book and even listening to your prior interview with Coming Out Swinging podcast, which is also a part of the Spotlight Podcast Network. Y'all check that out. Um, what inspired you or made you want to be this transparent to write this book? Because you have put some details in this book that the normal person would want to hide.
you know, when I went through losing my son, I only knew one other person that it happened to, and she just happened to be a really close friend of mine. And as soon as I lost my son, and I was a hairstylist, so a lot of people sat in my chair. So when I was sharing my story, they were like, "Oh my God, that happened to me. Oh my God, that happened to me." I was like, "Is this like a secret society or something?" Because nobody ever talks about it. I mean, nobody's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Hey, my name's Tavi and I lost my kid."
Right.
But even down to having, like, when people are in my chair, it's like therapy. They share, what they done did for a Klondike bar. They share stuff about their husbands, but
Mm-hmm.
stuff that deep, like losing a child and like postpartum depression, stuff like that, people don't talk about. And so I'm like, that could have helped me. Like,
Yeah.
if somebody would have said something, even my own mama, she lost a kid before too, but it was nothing that she really talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I want to talk about that with women so that people know that it's you're not alone, and it's not just something that is just happens on a whim. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
People die in childbirth, so it's something that I'm like, what, I'm gonna be completely vulnerable. And I'm not good at being depressed anyways, and I'm not going to like a support group where they're like, let's
Right.
talk about. No, I'm like, what happened, how did you deal with it? I was screaming, I was mad at God. Like, I want the
Mm-hmm.
real deal so people can help, get through it. And I found a lot of people were mad at God, and that in turn divided them from him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but if you have somebody to talk you through it, I mean, I was mad at God too, but it didn't divide me from him.
Yeah.
So if you have people that tell that part of the story and really get into being vulnerable and authentic, then I believe that can help anybody in any situation, whatever story it is.
So one thing you just said, you were mad at God. How did that anger with God still cause you to, because even through everything that you've been through, that anger with God drew you to God.
Yes. You know, I when I first got found out I was pregnant, I went to the pregnancy resource center, and I was like 4.5 months pregnant, and I was like, "Excuse me." Um, and the lady that did the ultrasound ended up being the same charge nurse that I had in the hospital when I delivered. And she came in, and after everything happened, I was just like, God, like, what did I do? What happened? Like, maybe it's because I was pregnant out of wedlock. But then I'm like, you're God.
Yeah.
You could have made my son be here. Like, you
Yeah.
can do anything. So why? Like, why me?
Yeah.
And she came in and said, God knows exactly how you feel because he lost a son too. And as soon as she said
Golly.
that, I was like, well, duh. Like, it's like it's something that
Yeah.
inherently, but it's like when somebody puts it just so plain to you like that. And I was just like, he did. And that son died for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I was like, how am I mad right now? How?
Yeah.
And so I just took that anger and I was like, there's no possible way that I can be mad. And one word that really stuck out to me is sovereign. God is sovereign.
Yes, he
He can
is.
do whatever, whenever, however,
Yes.
but it all works for our good. And so once I put those two together and I really leaned into the Holy Spirit being my comforter, I was like, okay, all right, let's work this out, Lord, because how I'm going to blame you when the son that was murdered for me.
Yeah. I'm so intrigued by the story. I just jumped straight into it. Um, you have a childhood fascination with clouds.
I do.
How did clouds play a role in even the cover of the book or even within the book?
So, like I said, I love clouds. Ever since I was a little girl, I was always to look up and like, oh my God, look at the clouds. And my grandma, she would pick me up from school, and take me to school and all those things. And so we would always look at the clouds. And she bought me this little grid that had different clouds on it.
Hmm.
And so I would look up at the cloud and then move the grid to the cloud, and it would tell me like if it's a cumulus cloud or a nimbus cloud
Oh
or
wow.
stratus cloud or whatever cloud it was. And then that would in turn tell us the weather. So my grandma would be like, okay, does it look like it's gonna rain, or does it look like it's gonna do this? And we would always see, you look up at the cloud like, oh, it looks like an elephant, or it looks like a whatever.
Yeah.
And as I traveled the country, I noticed that clouds look different in different parts of the world. And and that always brings, because I'm a God girl, so everything always goes back to God for me. And
Of course.
I'm like, God, it's as simple as a cloud that you create every day is different than in California than it is in Puerto Rico.
Hmm.
So like when I was in Puerto Rico, it looked like I could just touch them. Like
Yeah.
they were so fluffy. And even here in Texas now that I live, I'm like, they look like I can just touch them. They're just different everywhere. And I was just so fascinated with those. And I just love them so much. And so when I said blessings in the chaos, I said, clouds can represent storms
Hmm.
or beautiful days. Because you can have a beautiful day when you have these big, beautiful clouds, but then you can have a storm and there's these dark clouds. But it's still a cloud. And I said, God is a God of the clouds over the storm and over the beautiful days. So I said, I want to somehow put that in my cover. And I was on Canva and I was like, I'm gonna get some clouds and I'm gonna do
Yeah.
some this. And then one of my best friends, Mike, I was like, he does audio engineer, he does everything. And I was like, I want to do it like this, and I want to incorporate this clouds in the background. I just don't know how. And so I sent him what I had, and then he kind of tweaked it, and that's how it came about.
In your book, you lovingly dedicated this book to your mom. Could you share some of the life lessons that she imparted into you, and how you found a way, or if you found a way to put those lessons into the book?
My mom, I joke. You see, I says to the world's okayest mom.
Yes.
That's our inside joke because I had bought her a cup one Mother's Day. I thought it was hilarious. That said to the world's okayest mom. So it's just been a continual joke. But my mom is an open book. She will tell me and my sister always be like, "Here she goes telling all her business." If we're out somewhere. But even though I make fun of her for doing it, or even though sometimes I'm like, please don't be telling all your business, it has, instilled in me that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay
Yes.
to tell my story because it's my story. I don't have to be ashamed about anything that I did because the one who's going to judge me knows anyways.
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
knows, you know what I mean? So what else can somebody else do to me? And, my mom is, I always say, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Because she has
Yes.
been married 5 times. Okay.
Okay.
And she she was like, okay, next, that didn't work, next,
Yeah.
and I'm always, and people would look at me like, your mom's been married how many times? And I'm like, 5. Like, in a normal world like that, you get a little judgment for that, you know what I mean? But
Definitely.
I'm like, Elizabeth Taylor been married about 17, 18 times. Okay,
That
it's just
part.
because she got money, don't nobody say anything.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that my mom has always said to me is be yourself. Don't let anybody tell you who you are. God tells you who you are. And coming from my mom, that means a lot because she is not as outgoing as I am. She is not as like vibrant. And she always says, I wish, I was like that. I wish I was like that. My mom's very, cool, calm, and collective. She has a sense of humor, but she's kind of shy, if you will. But she's never stifled me. She's always encouraged me to be who I am. Like when I was little, my favorite color was orange, and I wanted to wear glitter everywhere. And she didn't say anything. She was like, "That's my daughter. She want to wear glitter, whatever." Or she would
Yeah.
let me rummage through her '70s clothes, and I would wear them to high school, and people would be like, "What are you doing?" And my mom would be like,
Yeah.
"That's what you want to do, then do it." And she's always taught me to never settle either, for anything in life, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
You don't, somebody tell you no, somebody else gonna tell you yes.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I really love about my mom is she's been in my corner since day one.
Yeah.
Anything I need, anything. She
Yeah.
has been there. There's not like my mama is my best friend and my biggest fan. And that's why I said in there, like, you've been rocking with me the longest, mom, because she has,
Yeah.
and she will tell me about myself, but there's plenty of times where she's just like, okay, that's you. And you got to understand that everybody doesn't think like you.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody doesn't do things like you. And that's okay. So, but just continue to be you and keep going. And if something's wrong, I'm your mama, I'm gonna tell you.
Yeah.
And then, and the Lord is gonna tell you too. So just don't mind those people. And that's what I did.
How
Yes.
did it feel growing up? Like, were you always okay with having that element around you all the time? Just God is the focal point, regardless to what you doing or where you are. God is God.
I always tell people I have the best of both worlds because my grandparents are the one that took me to church. My mom was
Okay.
partying, but she didn't play with God at the same time.
Yeah.
She's like, even though I might not go all the time, you gonna go with your grandma and grandpa
Mm-hmm.
because that's how she was raised. And there's parts of your life where you go through stuff, and but she still wanted to make sure that I had that. So to me, it was normal,
Mm-hmm.
when my grandpa was praying on his knees every night until he got on oxygen, when my grandma was singing hymns, when we had to go to vacation Bible school, whatever else that was open. If the church was open Monday through Friday, we was
We
there.
were there
Okay.
Monday through Friday. Yes.
Yeah, literally. And I always joke about that now. I'm like, sometimes I miss going to church every day because,
Yep.
I'm like, I need it. I need something other than Sundays. But it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
It was strange to some of my friends because there's things that I wouldn't do. Like I wasn't cussing. I didn't, I wasn't having sex at a young age. I wasn't doing any of that. And they were just like, but I was like, well, I was told I wasn't supposed to. So I
Yeah.
just didn't. And because that's what we do in church. So I don't know. So it was always instilled in me, and it was like I said, it was just normal.
Yeah.
So that's all I knew. Correct. And I think that it's a level of accountability that's missing too,
Yes.
because you can fool people behind the camera,
Mm-hmm.
but when you walk up in that church, you can't, because somebody will be like, if they get that
Discernment.
gift of discernment,
Yes.
they own you like, what is you doing? And you
Mm-hmm.
be like, you can't hide from that.
Yeah.
In this day and age, you can hide from anything. You can be whoever you want to be. Look at TikTok, look at Instagram. You
Yes.
can be whoever you want to be
Yeah.
and not have any real integrity or character.
So, as you were speaking before, you were talking about the loss of your son. During that process, how long did it take you to allow yourself to become vulnerable to want to share that story?
It was almost immediately because I went to my 6 week checkup and I had my makeup on, I had my coach bag, I had my little squirt, and my doctor was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I'm going to have sushi." I didn't have sushi for 9 months. And she started crying, and I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" She goes, "I had a lady that the same thing happened to, and she just tried to kill herself."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Wow." I said, "Well, I don't do well at being depressed. Being like, let me cry one time, scream one time, get it out, and then I'm gonna move on."
Yeah.
Um, I found that talking about it helped. That was my therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, There were times when I didn't want to. Like, I had a client one time and her daughter had a baby and she bought the baby in and she just handed me the baby. And I was like, whoa,
Mm,
whoa, 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 hold
yeah,
on. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I had to go to the bathroom and gather myself because it just hit me. Like,
yeah.
I don't have my son here, and I hadn't held a baby. Things like that hit me, but talking about it was relatively easy for me because I didn't want to keep it bottled up. I didn't want to deal with those emotions in the dark. I didn't want to be depressed and I didn't want to do like the whole woe is me thing. I found that talking through it got me through it, literally.
Wow.
And everybody that sat in my chair and that I would tell it each time, whether it was time 3 or time 300, it would just solidify some things, and it would give me little like tidbits. Even though I would have to repeat the story, there were things I'd be like, oh man, like I could have. It wasn't until a lady sat in my chair and was like, you could have died, and I was like, I could have
Mm,
died. Like that, it didn't register how monumental it was. And when I was telling her that I had to have a blood transfusion and they were almost had a life like me, and she was like, God saved your life. And I was like, oh my God, he did. Like, so do things like that. I always say too, it keeps Jesus in the forefront,
hmm.
and reminds you that this life is so short.
Yeah. How did so? At what level of appreciation did you have whenever God allowed you to have the child that you have now?
Every day I look at her. Like yesterday, I was telling my husband, he's like, "You're so emotional." I was like, I could just cry. Looking at her when she's like, "I love you, mommy," because it's such a new experience
Hmm.
and it's such a different time in my life. I was 21, 22 back then, um, doing ridiculous things, and really didn't have my life together at that time. And then I was also married to someone else, and shouldn't have been married to that person, but everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
And just looking at my life now, I have a deep gratitude and a deep appreciation that I'm also able to stay home with her and raise her. Back then I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Hmm.
And I always say it's kind of bittersweet because she could have had a big brother. I could have been raising two kids, together. But at the same time, it's like it's not what I missed out on. It's what I get to instill in my daughter now,
Yeah.
that I didn't have at 22, 23
Hmm.
years old. The lesson that I have learned, like I always say, I would give anything to have my son here, but I definitely wouldn't be the woman I am today, raising the child that I'm raising, today. So I believe that she benefited from that because all of the experience that I have now.
Hmm. I believe that experience is the best teacher. Um,
Yeah.
Keeping along the lines of things that have made you the woman that you are today. Not only did you have to go through the loss of a child, but as I stated before, you also had to go through the loss of a marriage at this around that same time. How did that affect what you had already felt regarding the loss of the child, or was that before or after?
It was after. So we were dating when I got pregnant, and then as we lost my son, and then like a month later we got married. It was one of those trauma bonding, like we lost our kid, we didn't want to lose each other. But back then we didn't have the emotional tools or emotional maturity to know how to deal with it. So we thought, let's get married. Let's just bond to each other. Um but nobody tells you that you go through grief in a divorce because it's just like, oh, like on what's that movie, divorce, ding ding ding, yay, it's
Yeah.
over. That's not really true because two become one, right? So when your two become one and then you separate, some of that stuff is that was that one is separated. So they're taking a piece of you with them and you're taking a piece of them with you. And it was hard because I just knew that no matter how bad it was or how good it was, nobody goes into a marriage think they're going to get a divorce. Okay, nobody. I don't care if it's day two that it goes sour. Day one, you thought y'all was going to be together forever, and I
Hmm.
did. He was my childhood sweetheart. Um, high school sweetheart. We grew up together. So it was like, that was, my person at the time. And so grieving that loss, it was trying to navigate without him, and then without a piece of my son, because he was the one that gave me my son. And so it was tough, because I, like you said, it was like, okay, boom, I lost my son, and then a year later, boom, I'm a year or two later, I'm getting a divorce. It was like hit after hit, I felt. And we just couldn't support each other in the way we needed to, because we didn't know any better. And I now see, and I thought like it don't even affect him. He's just, but I now see that he just didn't know how to grieve. We were grieving differently. And now that, it and how it affected him, he called me years later and apologized, and was just like, I had to go to therapy, because he was like, there was just some things that was building up in me, and they told me to make a list of people to apologize to, and you were at the first in my list. He said, because I don't feel like I was there for you the way I needed to be when we lost our son. And I was like, well, you didn't know how, and I apologize for not being there for you. But that grief is different, because the person's not dead.
Yeah.
They're still there. You know what I mean? And if you have kids, you got to see them. I mean, thankfully, I didn't really have to deal with him, but it's hard, because that they're moving on with their life. And it really was hard for me when I found out a year later he got somebody pregnant. And I was like, all right, God, you better talk to me,
Yeah.
because here I am. I'm living my life for you. He's not. Why does he get to have a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Explain. I need some context, because I'm about to lose it,
Yeah.
And I had to really sit with that, and I had to wrestle with that, because I was like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to, when he told me, he knew that he didn't have to tell me, but he did.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew it would be hard for me. And I was like, I want to see what the child looks like, because I want to see if he looked like my kid. Like, I went through this whole thing. And, God really sat me down and was like, um, you got to learn you. It needs to be just me and you for a while. And you don't know, just because kids are a blessing, yes, but you don't know the situation behind that.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's going to happen with that. And do you want to be stuck with that? And so once I got those things, I'm like, okay, Lord, okay, I see
Yeah.
you. But that was hard. That was hard.
In the process of both of those, did you ever reach a point of feeling unworthy? And if so, what did it take you to get to feeling worthy?
Feeling unworthy, I would say yes, because it was like, well, why didn't I get to keep my kid? Why did my marriage not work out? Why did he get to go have kids? Why is he in a relationship? Like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Let's figure that out. And that was one of the reasons why I was single for 8 years. It was just me and Jesus. I was like, I don't even want to look at men, because I
Yeah.
need to figure out if I'm the Tavia that I created, or
Mm-hmm.
the Tavia that God created. And in that season is where I figured out, I've always been kind of keen on who I was, but I was standing 10 toes down in who God created me to
Yeah.
be. In those seasons, because it was a lot. I had to learn that I didn't love unconditionally. I had to learn that I had stipulations that I didn't need to. I had to learn that my smart mouth, I need to bring back. I had to learn that I wasn't the man in the marriage. I had to learn a lot of things, um, in order to find that when I do get married again, I want it to last. You know what I'm saying? And so in that process, I think that's where I found my worthiness. That's where I found like, no, I'm okay. No, it's okay to have standards.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're this. No, you're a child of God. And so in those 8 years, all of that, that's where I found that.
And you found it, and it empowered you to try love again. How did it feel to try love all over again?
Man, that was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. Because I was like, no,
Yeah.
like you not finna play me.
Yeah.
Like what you not gonna do is.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I was coming from. And I was a self-sabotager.
Mm-hmm.
I would mess it up in a minute, because I'm like, no, I don't like he got on white shoes. I'm not doing it. Oh,
Yeah.
no, and my best friend and the Holy Spirit were always like, what is wrong with you? Like, relax. You ain't got to check everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Like, you it's okay. And then I had to learn, um I was going through therapy at the time, and she said people are gonna disappoint you. Like, that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And even though you know that, it was like a light that went off. I'm like, They're like, and in love, you're gonna be hurt. It doesn't mean that it's gonna be intentional. Now, there's a difference between intentional and unintentional. You're two different people trying to come together, trying to figure out each other's stuff. He got trauma, you got trauma. You gotta try to work it out. And I said, okay, all right, And I always say, like I told my husband, I said, if it wasn't for my therapist, I don't know if we would make it, because she had to literally, I was like, she was my relationship coach. I'd be like, okay, now he did this. What should I do? Because this is what I want to do. And I know that's not right. Like, I want to crash out, but
Yeah.
I shouldn't be doing that every time something doesn't go my way. And I always tell everybody, like, I learned that the world did not revolve around me at 35 years old.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have it your way all the time. And you have to, be mindful of somebody else. And I wasn't, because I didn't have no kids at that point. I was single forever, so it was just me, and I did what I wanted to do, come and go as I please. I didn't have to, if I didn't like the way you was talking to me, okay, bye.
Yeah.
But when you want to be in love and you want to be married, those are things you got to consider.
Yeah. And it's hard whenever you've been through things that would cause you to have those trust issues, or cause you to have those guardrails up. And sometimes a person will do something that look like something that somebody else done, and it triggers you, and you're like, nope, you're not the one. See you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was saying the same thing. She's like, she's been single. She had a really rough divorce, and she was like, no. Like, and now she's like, okay, I want to date. She's like, but now I'm just looking at people like, no, I don't like that. No, I don't like that. She's like, and ooh, you look like him. Oh no. And I said, everybody goes through that. I said, but I said, I don't think I prayed that much in my life, because I'm like, Lord, you got to get me out of this. Lord, and I journaled a lot too. So that helped me. And going back and reading some of my journal entries, I was like, you were crazy, but I'm glad I wrote it and didn't say it, But it's like, God really had to get me together and be like, no, like, he's not perfect, just like you're not perfect, but this is it. You know what I mean? It's gonna work. But you got to trust me. And he would always be like, do you trust me? And I'd be like, yes. He'd be like, okay, then. Have I ever led you wrong? And I'm like, no. He's like, so why in this would you think I would?
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right.
Do you think it's okay to have a long list of, and try to make your person fit every single thing on the list that you want?
I always say to have a list of standards. Be realistic. Like, mine were like, you gotta love God first. Like, you gotta love God and serve God. Like, for real. Not just you go to church on Sundays. Like, you gotta have a relationship with him. You have to have good character, integrity, all that stuff.
Yeah.
You gotta make me laugh. You gotta have a good 401k.
Come on,
let's just be real. Okay, you need benefits. And chocolate would work. That helps. If you're chocolate, that helps me. And I wrote down in my journal, I want this person to adore me. And my husband has a good 401k. He is chocolate. He loves God. He could sing, So I got those things, Now there's other things where I'm like, I should have said, but he probably says about me like, I should have said. But I think it's okay to have a list, because it helps you not to compromise. Yes. You know what I mean? Those standards help you not to be like, well, because once you then it just goes to hell from there, you know? And so I'm like, it's okay. I also tell my nieces, have standards.
Yeah.
Like, my goddaughter now was like, she has a husband now. She's like, you told me do, and I stuck to those things, and he is, what I wanted. And I was like, well, thank God that you listened. But I think it's okay. Now, I think if it's like, if he's not 5'10" and a half, things like that, now you have to be attracted to this person. Do not get me wrong. Okay. Yeah. God ain't gonna have you marry somebody that you're not attracted to.
Exactly.
So, you have to be attracted to them, but little like nuance, like blue eyes, get some contacts, like,
you get some shoes that have an extra heel in it.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Like, some of those things, I always say those are negotiables, but you have non-negotiables.
Yes.
Those are my non-negotiable was Jesus and 401k, all those things. But negotiables, if he was light skinned, okay, I might have, but I prefer chocolate. You know what I'm saying? So those, you just got, when you get to be, too much. And And a lot of those things are defense mechanisms. Oh,
Yes.
he's not that. He doesn't have curly hair, so I can't. But
Mm-hmm.
it's to protect you. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to be hurt, but unfortunately we are. And you
Yeah.
just got to learn the level of hurt and learn who's worth the work, cuz ain't
Mm-hmm.
everybody worth the work.
This is true. This is very true. But some people they'll mask it and make you think that they good with it, but eventually
Mhm.
that mask has to come off.
Yeah.
So I've been scouring your Instagram. When I say I've been stalking you, I've been stalking you intentionally and on purpose. How
That's
does it
fine.
feel whenever you see the people who have purchased your book or who have heard something that you've said or read something that you've written somewhere, and they're able to say, "I can relate to this."
Man, I was just telling my husband yesterday I got a review, and she said, I was never somebody that was brought up in church. I didn't even know if God was real. I thought maybe it was a maybe. She was like, but after reading your book, I'm starting to look at things differently. And I was just like, God, you're so good. Like, because I wrote the book with, if one person could just get something out of it, then I will be fine. That will be my reward.
Yeah.
And so seeing that multiple people and they're like, it's almost like, okay, like don't tell me, like
Yeah.
I don't feel worthy of it. And it's crazy to me because to be honest, I didn't really think that my story was that deep or powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I really went through a lot. And I said that I think God graced me that way to not think that it was that big of a deal so that I could write all out and could be so
Yeah.
vulnerable. Um and so when people come back and be like, "Oh my gosh, like that happened. I didn't know this." Or even my best friend that was there through everything, she read it. She goes, "I got to read what was going on in your mind."
Yeah.
You know? And it feels good, but at the same time it feels surreal because it's like, wow, God, like you entrusted me,
Yeah.
and me, I wild out. Like
Yeah.
you entrusted me to carry this story, to give it to the world, and then to share you. Like to be your representative. And sometimes I don't be representing you well, but
Yes.
with this, I can honestly say I feel like I did. And not to toot my own horn, but just from the feedback I get and when I'm in my prayer time, it's like, no, I can say I did this well and
Yeah.
that I made my daddy proud, and
Yeah.
that's everything to me.
Yeah. Have you considered this ministry?
I haven't considered it ministry until my husband said, "This is your ministry."
Some people, just like the lady that left the review that's was saying she had been dealing with not believing that there was a God. There are some people who will read a book before they go inside the church. So
Mhm.
God has to
Mhm.
hide he has to hide the peel in the food.
Yeah, yeah.
So with you, it's like he's using you as a conduit to like make sure that I reach people who won't necessarily come to me. I believe
Mhm.
that this is probably the thing that God, like you said at the beginning, you had to go through something because there are people who are going through things that don't know there's a way out.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny, a friend of mine lost her father, and she ended up buying my book and she read it and she was like, being in my grief right now and reading that you can come out on the other side and how you dealing with it and how I don't have to feel like, oh my God, when is this going to end? Because it kind of never does. But knowing that I can have the tools to deal with it, that just really helps. And I was like, grief is like, I'm just thinking of it as a point of view as losing a child. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking I'm just going to reach people that lost a child, not in different areas of grief, but grief is grief.
Mm-hmm.
And so hearing that is just, it's
Yeah.
mind blowing every time.
Absolutely. Having three distinct father figures is unique. How did each of them influence your outlook on family, relationships, and identity?
Man, growing up with three daddies, is funny because I got a little bit of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember when I was younger and talking to this guy and he was trying to run some game. I said, let me tell you something. You can't play a player number one,
Yeah.
okay? And number two, I got three daddies. So
Yeah.
I got all the game that they've given me all the game, okay? So there's nothing that you finna do that's new to me. My stepdad, I call him daddy. He raised me since I was 2 years old. He is the one that's my dad. Because he was there in the home with me,
Mm-hmm.
and he is from New York, true New Yorker, loud, outgoing. Like my husband was like, "Is he yelling? Is he okay?" I'm like, "That's just the way he talks." I'm like, "That's just the way he talks." He's like, "Every time you're on the phone, I think y'all arguing," and I'm like, "That's just the way we talk."
Yeah.
But he is the hustler. He's the one that's like, where don't let nobody tell you no.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can tell you no. If you want to do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And he was always like, don't depend on nobody but me, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, you can do it. He is very gung-ho about independence. And I attribute him for my independence and my hustleness. My mom always said I can sell a used car to a used car salesman.
Come on.
I get that from my dad.
Yeah.
And my biological father, I didn't find out who he was until I was 33 years old. I always knew that there was a possibility, but it wasn't solidified till I was 33 years old. And DNA is a crazy thing. I look just like him. I act just like him, even though I wasn't raised with him. And in that 8-year period, I was talking about being single. That's some of the stuff I had to learn because I met him in that period.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at him was like looking in a mirror. And I said, okay, so if he's pissing me off with some of the stuff he do, and I'm like him, I'm pissing other people off over on this end. So Lord help me.
Yeah.
And he was not the easiest person to deal with, and I'm not either. And I would be like, oh my God, every day I wanted to just be like, I'm out. And the Lord will be like, no, you're not. How he's going to learn unconditional love is through you. How he's going to learn how my grace and mercy is through you. Because every time, I swear, every night I would be like, I am done. And every morning the Lord would be like, call him. And I'd be like, but why? I'm the baby. I'm the kid.
Yeah.
He's the adult, And God would be like, no. So, but I get my fieriness from him, for sure, is from him. And then my mom's, who I thought was my biological father, he is so, he's a workaholic. So I get my workaholic ways from him.
Mm-hmm.
But I also get my wit. He is quick-witted, and he is very... You'll never know what's bothering him. He's very poker face all the time. And I used to always be like, well, do you like me? Do you not like me? Because that's just the way that he was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until but he was there for every school thing. When I had my kid, when I traveled to India, when I had surgery, he was there. That's the way that he would show his love.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a little bit from everybody, and I wouldn't be who I am today without any of those men. So I appreciate that. And my friend, I remember her saying, like, my daddy don't want nothing to do with me. You got 3. Like they all want to be, a part of you. They're all like, nope, that's my daughter. Nope, that's my daughter. And she goes, that is a blessing. And I would complain sometimes because I'd be like, oh my God, these men, I feel like they're all neat. But they're my dads, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't.
Whenever you fell in love again and got married, did you see any of the characteristics of your father's in him?
I did. More so my grandpa, because I'm a grandpa's girl too.
Okay.
I write about him in my book as well. He's very... I think I always say that's where my love of chocolate men come from, because my grandpa was chocolate.
Okay.
My husband is very quiet, very patient. And I'm like, and he's just like, that's my wife, I'll let her be,
Yeah.
So he has the more mannerisms of my grandpa, but the protection is definitely my dad, James, who was the New Yorker. That's all him. The kind of poker face is Ken, and then the way that he'll buck back up at me if needed. That would be the fiery part. So
Mm-hmm.
there are things in there, and it's always funny. It's like, you marry your mom, you marry your dad,
Yeah.
and when you look at my husband now, I'm like, I did, but I always say he got a little bit of my mom too. So it's funny,
That's amazing. And that make it easier for you to fall in love?
I was smitten from day one.
Oh, I love this.
With him. I was just like, this is it. And he was like, ma'am, I don't know you like that.
Yeah,
And I was like, it's fine. It's all right.
Yeah.
but it did because his demeanor is so welcoming.
Yeah.
And he's from the South, so he's a Southern gentleman, and he is anything I need, anything, he just, I always say I felt like a woman when I started dating him.
Wow.
Because he allowed me to be that. I didn't have to be the strong, independent woman, that is a gift and a curse. I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
to be like, no, let me take care of business because he takes care of business,
Mm-hmm.
but it was so much easier, falling in love with him. And, like any red flag was like a carnival, like, okay, it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
because he was just so, it was just easy. It was not hard at all. When we started dating and we find out things about each other, it got a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But the initial, it was easy.
I love that for you because whenever you talk about him, your whole entire everything lights up.
Yeah. Yeah. I
um,
love that man. I do.
you give me hope then. Come on, shoot, give me a little bit of hope for tomorrow. You have a profound spiritual experience that guided you through challenging times. Um, Whenever it comes down to, and of course, we already know we've established that God is everything in your life, but what would have happened, or who do you think Tavia Bradford would be if she didn't have that God guide through the things that she's been through?
Listen, I'll be out here wilding out because that's my flesh and my nature is party girl.
Yeah,
It is sex, drugs, rock and roll.
yeah,
It is let's do the craziest things we
yeah.
could do. Let's see how high we could get. Let's
Mm-hmm.
go party over here. Like I have no fear, so to speak. Like I would be partying in Mexico. I've traveled the country by myself,
Mm-hmm.
as a woman, and I will go anywhere. Like I don't. It never dawns on me that something can happen to me. I
Yeah.
don't know why. It just doesn't. I would be definitely just in the streets everywhere. Like, like I like to travel, so I'm gonna be here, there. And then, I don't know if I talk about it in my book. I can't, I think I do a little bit. Like, I like to experiment with things. So I'll probably be on drugs,
Mm-hmm.
like and I like a libation. So it would be everything to the excess.
Yeah.
Everything. Like I never did, everything was go big or go home. I
Yeah.
never did anything small. So I would just probably be ratchet and out of control. Really.
It's safe to say I was watching. I think it was one of your Instagram stories where you was dancing around with a big smile on your face. You are genuinely happy now.
Yeah.
How does it feel to just be happy and know that you're you're safe now?
I have to remind myself because I'm like, these are the days you prayed for. And, I'll complain. I'm human. I'm like, well, I didn't heed it and I don't
Yeah.
like, but I'm like, these are literally the days of answered prayer. And, I look around my house with my kid, my dog, my husband,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, God is so good. And it feels surreal sometimes that like this is my life.
Yeah.
I'm not rich. I don't have the fancy car like people would or anything like that, but I am happy. I if God doesn't do another thing, he's done enough. I know
Come
that's
on.
cliche, but for
Come
real,
on.
he
Yes.
really has. I don't have to worry about anything. You know what I'm saying? Like, my husband has afforded me the opportunity not to work so I can stay home with my kid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to worry about being, not being safe because I feel safe. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to worry about crazy stuff. It's just, it's good. It feels good to lay your head down on the pillow at night and wake up and be clear headed, not wake up like, here we go again.
Same
What's
old
going to
thing.
happen today? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, like it's just wake up and be like, all right, Monroe, let's get ready. Let's get my iced coffee. We
Yeah.
got a routine. Baby, you want me to make you breakfast? Like, it's, it, I like my life.
Yeah.
I really do. Now, can I complain? And is there's little things? Do we argue? Yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, I have joy because happiness is fleeting. It'll come
Yes.
and go, but
Yes.
and joy is found in the Lord, and I have
Mm-hmm.
Him. So that is really what it boils down to is just having Him and having Him at the center of everything. I had to learn to have him at the center. Sometimes he would be like, okay, here, Jesus, you can be there, you can be
Yeah.
here, but don't touch that part.
Yeah.
But really having him in the center is hard too, because then you got to deal with stuff.
Yeah.
But it's still the joy that's there, the joy of the Lord that's there continuously, no matter what.
Yeah. Um, because you done just flipped so many switches in my head, I'm gonna veer off for a couple seconds. One of your prayers for your the husband before you got him was for him to have a relationship with God. And I asked this question because we living in a day and time now. I feel like I'm aging myself, but like people don't necessarily care about that quality.
Hmm.
Why was just that in general? Why was it important for him to have a relationship with God?
It was important for him to have a relationship because it was important to me, because that's the season I was in. After losing my son, going through a divorce, being in that 8 year of it was literally just me and Jesus, and I was not playing about
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. Like, I was serving in ministry, like, I was in church all the time. I was like, no, I consulted God about everything, and that was at the top of my list, because if something happens to me, God forbid, and I need you to pray for me. What
Oh
what
yes,
you gonna if you
yes,
don't know how to pray, if you don't got a relationship, how are you helping me?
yeah,
You can give me money, great. You could pay a bill,
mm-hmm.
great. But how are you gonna help me spiritually?
Yeah,
If if I'm in spiritual warfare, if I'm at a job and it's spiritual warfare going on, and I need somebody to help pray for me, and you the closest person to me, and you don't know how to do that, what's
yeah,
gonna happen?
yeah.
And then, I mean, and if you really, truth be told, they will bring you down most of the time rather than you bring them up,
True.
because then you focus on so much of, I got to get them to be this, I got to get them to do that, I'm gonna make him go to church, I'm gonna make him do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to be making you do any of that.
Yeah.
I'm at a point, and I was, how old was I when 35, and I was like, ain't nobody got time for that. We either doing this or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you love God or not. And if you don't, then you're just not for me. You can be a great person, but you're just not for me, because
Yeah.
I need to know where you're rooted in. Because when stuff go wrong, I need to know that you ain't gonna go astray, because you
Absolutely.
don't got God, because you're not accountable to only me, but to God.
Absolutely.
So I want to know that you don't want to, you fear God, and you don't want to disappoint God,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just a human. You can do whatever you want to me, but if you have somebody else that you are accountable to, God, then it's less likely that you're gonna do some crazy stuff. I'm not saying that you won't, but it's less likely. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And then if it does happen, we know who we can both count on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we know that we're not going to just, I want a divorce now because you did this or I did that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, no, we're accountable to God, and we made a vow in the eye, in front of God, that we was going to go through thick and thin.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me meant a lot.
Um, what is the one thing that you want people to take away from reading this book?
My big thing is authenticity. Just be your authentic self, because God cannot bless who you pretend to be. He
Come
can
on.
only bless who he's made you to be. And my call to action is to just look back over your life. In the worst cases scenarios, in the worst part of your life, you're on the other side of that now, and that's only because of one thing: God has kept you in the chaos, and there was blessings and nuggets in that stuff that you would have never found out, that you would have never hold on to, that would have never developed your character like it did had you not gone through. So to always be, it's very easy to forget what God has done.
Yeah.
Very easy. God can bless you yesterday and you forget today.
Mm-hmm.
But to always be mindful of that, because that's what's really going to push you and keep you going forward. And to just cast all your cares on him for real. Because it's when we keep picking it back up,
Mm-hmm.
is when we make stuff worse.
Yeah.
But with him, it's so much easier, with him. Now, I'm not saying being a Christian is easy, because it is not, because you have to lay down yourself. Like, I literally have it tattooed on me, deny yourself daily,
Yeah.
because you have to do that. But, just be authentic, look for the blessings in the chaos, and let God do the work. Let Him
Yeah.
do it because you can't go wrong. So you can go to my website at www.taviab.com, and it gives you a list of who I am, all my socials, and you can purchase my book there. I am also author Tavia B on Instagram and TikTok. So hit
What
me
do
up.
we have coming up in the future? Do you have anything?
So this weekend, actually, I am a vendor at a book festival. It's my birthday tomorrow, and my husband's like, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "I want to go sell my book." So
That
I
boy,
will be,
yes.
yes, I will be at the Copperfield 11th Annual Book Festival this weekend, and next, when is it? I just did. I was a speaker at a conference for my first lady. She had a conference called Radiance, and they did video interviews, and I got to do that. Next up is I want to start a community. Well, it's on my website. It's called Healing Mamas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically healing mamas, mamas healing mamas. And it's a community for women that have infertility or pregnancy loss, things like that. So that it's not just your traditional support group, come talk about your feelings, light a candle, woo woo, go home.
Yeah.
No, it's take me step by step. What did you do? What was in your journal? What did you say?
Mm-hmm.
To help you to process this, not get through it because it's something that you don't get through,
Yeah.
but to process it. And it's even open to grandmoms or moms that don't know how to support their loved ones, because I found that too is people don't know what to say sometimes,
Yeah.
and they just say random things and they mean well, but some of those things, that's not what we want to hear.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you can have another baby. I know that, but I want my baby now.
Right now, yeah.
So that is the next big thing for me.
Well, I am looking forward to hearing about it and bringing you right back on to talk about it. And if there's anything that we can do in the process to make that happen, we're going to make it happen. I forgot to mention bestsellers list. How did it feel when you hit it?
It was crazy because it was a little glitch. Like, I had with one particular hub that you sell your book from, I wasn't able to make their bestsellers list because I didn't know that I couldn't make my cover on Canva. I didn't know that. And so I was really bummed. I'm like, dang, I'm not gonna be able to be on this one.
Mm-hmm.
But blessing in disguise is when I sold the book myself, because I usually do it through my website. Not only do you make more money because I don't have to give them
Overhead
a
and all of
portion,
that. Yeah.
but I have more control over what
Mm-hmm.
I do. And so with that control, I was able to make the Ingram Spark bestseller, with doing all of these and rather quickly. And I was like, oh my God, I'm number 5. Like, oh my God. I was
Yeah.
like, how did that happen? But it was a blessing that I didn't get one of those and got to this. And so when I hit it, I was like, my publisher was like, I told you. And I was like,
Yeah.
because she read the book too. And she ended up giving it to her niece that had some pregnancy loss. And she was like, oh my God. She was like, I read them because I'm supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, but this is good for real. And, sometimes I think people are like patronizing me, like, oh, it's good,
Yeah.
but to see that and have that accomplishment, it was like, put some respect on my name, okay?
That part, yeah.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. I don't take it lightly. You could have anybody on here. And I just want to say all glory to God and keep doing what you're doing because you're helping us to get our stories out. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy Tazz. You are listening to or watching the Intro Podcast. I'm joined with she's invited to the Sunday dinner, so this is my sister, the one and only Miss Tavia Bradford, the author of Blessing in the Chaos. I need you guys to go to her website and purchase this book. Purchase it for you, your mom, your aunties, your girlfriend, your side chick. Just purchase the book because everybody needs to know what is in this book. Of course, you'll see the information at the bottom where you can do all of that, and it's going to be on all of our social media. Blow this up, share this podcast with everyone that you guys know. Also, again, thank you, Miss Tavia, for being a part of today's show. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. We'll be right back in just a minute.